welcome to NewsClick. Today we are going to discuss about the recent series of events that have taken place in Bangladesh and what is the way ahead. To discuss the issue we have with us senior journalist Javed Anand, who also is co-editor with Sabrang India. Over the last few months, you have seen that regular the bloggers, various secular voice activists, democratic voices activists have been attacked in Bangladesh, and then it has been followed by attack in Dhaka. IS has claimed that it is their deed, and if we look at it, IS has started increasing its intervention in South Asia. So, do you see just merely as an intervention of IS, or is it also byproduct of their homegrown problems?
I think, Pranjal, it might be useful to do a little, go back a little and see what is happening in terms of the Muslim world in the last several decades. I think we need to look closely at three Muslim leaders. One, Abul Ala Maududi of the Indian subcontinent, who founded the Jamaat-e-Islami.
Yeah.
Two is Sayyid Qutb, who did not found the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded long before he came into the picture from Egypt. And we go back to Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab of the Najaf region in Arabia, which is part of today's Saudi Arabia. These three people, in their different ways to simplify things, to put it in simple words, basically propounded or propagated the idea that it is not enough for Muslims to lead their lives. It is not enough for Muslims to kind of worship Allah and to live their lives in according with Allah's wishes, as spelled out in the Quran and the Hadith, etc. It is much more than that. It is the bounden duty of every Muslim man and woman to strive with every means possible to establish Allah's laws, sovereignty in the world. Because only Allah is sovereign and His laws must prevail. And therefore, it is a duty of every Muslim man and woman to kind of strive by every means possible to establish His laws in the world. Otherwise, we'll talk about what we can say is political Islam. Now, some people say that within political Islam itself, there is kind of non-violent political Islam and there's violent political Islam. Without going there, what we can say for sure is that since the jihad, or what is called the jihad in Afghanistan against the Soviet occupation, Afghanistan proved to be the laboratory or the crucible where the ideas of Abdul Wahab, the ideas of Sayyid Qutb, the ideas of Abul Ala Maududi and their followers, who were part of that jihad, who came from other parts of the world, intermingled, cross-fertilized, and we have the kind of jihad which in the first place was fought to throw out the Soviet forces from Afghanistan, and later on we know what is happening across the world. The point is that this question that it is not enough to practice Islam yourself, but you must strive by every means possible to establish Allah's laws, basically introduces the element of force, inevitably, right? So you might, on the one hand, have many people, many followers of Wahab or Qutb or Maududi, but the germ of the idea that Islam must be imposed, Sharia law, Islamic State is what needs to be established, Sharia law is what needs to be kind of implemented, etc., is quite the germ of this idea exists within this. What happened after the Soviets kind of had to move out of Afghanistan, it proved to be a huge high for Muslims who subscribed to this worldview of this idea of political Islam. They believed that they had defeated the one of the two superpowers of the world at that time. And just some years earlier, Ayatollah Khomeini and his people in Iran had overthrown the Shah's regime, which was supported by the other superpower in the world. So this sent Muslims who subscribed to this kind of a worldview on a huge high, saying that, and it gave a huge spurt to such ideas, and they spread across the Muslim world. Firstly. Secondly, those who, after the Soviets had left Afghanistan, those who had come from different countries, now there were not so many, to the best of my knowledge, from India or Bangladesh at that time, but from Pakistan, from other parts of the Islamic world, they went to their countries carrying the germs of those ideas to spread those ideas. Now, these ideas have also found their expressions, found their takers in the Indian subcontinent as well. And the backdrop of this is the year 2013, that the International Crimes Tribunal Bangladesh, more commonly referred to as the War Crimes Tribunal, appointed by the Sheikh Hasina government in 2009 after she returned to power, in the early part of 2013, some of the top leaders, the first of the top leaders of the Jamaat-e-Islami, who were accused of serious crimes against humanity, against the people of Bangladesh, or what became Bangladesh in 1971 after the Liberation War. He was found guilty by the tribunal of some heinous kind of crimes, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. This is what triggered four students started. The specific case, the second person from the Jamaat-e-Islami who was sentenced by the tribunal, Abdul Qadir Mullah, if I remember his name. Yeah, Abdul Qadir Mullah was his name. He was a top leader of Jamaat-e-Islami in 1971 also. That triggered a protest. To begin with, there were four students who started a Facebook page saying, and then the whole thing snowballed into what came still remembered as the Shahbag Square movement. Then, in response to that, the Jamaat-e-Islami hit back. They call this is a movement of anti-Islam atheists, and it is quite interesting that it is exactly the same language that the Jamaat-e-Islami had used in 1952 in the then East Pakistan, when the people of East Pakistan were had launched a movement saying they wanted not Urdu but Bengali to be the kind of official language for East Pakistan. Now, so here is an indigenous group of people committed to the idea of Islamic State Sharia law. There in Syria and Iraq now we have the ISIS, which has declared itself as a caliphate. So there's declared itself as a caliphate, and it's calling upon Muslims from all across the world to recognize that horror Mr. Baghdadi as their caliph and to become part of the caliphate, etc., etc. So there is a natural ideological affinity between one and the other. It suits the ISIS establish a foothold and grow in Bangladesh. It suits the cadre of the Jamaatul Mujahideen who become part of a larger role for all kinds of help, etc., etc. Then at the same time, there is also the subcontinental wing of the chapter of the Al-Qaeda. There is this competition also between the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda as to who is going to represent lead Muslims, etc., etc. So the Bangla government, since the July 1 bomb blast, and even earlier on each time there was an attack, it's not just atheists and quote-unquote secularists who have been killed before this July 1 attack, one at a time. There were Hindu priests who were targeted, there were Sufis who were targeted, there were professors who were targeted because they were like music, etc., etc. And ISI has laid claim in each of these times, and the Awami government, the government of Sheikh Hasina, has consistently claimed that these are local groups or whatever it is, local malcontents, local this, local that, whatever it is, they have nothing to do with ISIS. At the same time, the IS is claiming something else. I think sitting from the outside and also listening to some voices from within Bangladesh, it does look as if the two of them are coming together. And the second part and the most disturbing part of the whole thing is that through these last few months and even earlier, from 2013 onwards, the moment the Jamaat-e-Islami started attacking so-called atheists, for them, anybody who supports the ideal of a secular democratic polity is an atheist. Secularism is equal to atheism. From that time onwards, instead of defending the freedom of expression, Sheikh Hasina and her government have been kind of giving lectures to the effect, more or less, of treating the victim as the accused.
Yeah, that is the question. I mean, is Sheikh Hasina government able to do it or not is the question.
It doesn't look like it. It doesn't look. I mean, okay, you hear occasionally kind of statements saying that India and Bangladesh will fight terrorism together, etc., etc. But on each time these incidents have happened, there doesn't seem to be a coherent, consistent kind of a program to fight this kind of a violent, intolerant brand of Islam, through a wide platform which comprises of people who are believers, who are non-believers, who are Hindus, who are Buddhists, who are Christians, or whatever it is. It seems to me that the Sheikh Hasina kind of practice of secular politics is not very different from that of the Congress and other secular parties in this country.
Before we move further, can you please throw some light also on the current state of relationship between the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, Khalida Zia, and Jamaat-e-Islami? I mean, what's going on? What's the equation between these two groups?
For a short while in 2013, when the Shah Bagh movement was at its height, some reports indicate that the Khalida Zia was trying to kind of send some feelers to them, which would suggest that she would side with them rather than with the Jamaat-e-Islami. But given her brand of politics, given her past, etc., etc., there was not much of a response. So I think in the circumstances that the Bangladesh National Party finds itself, it would probably sail close to, stay close with the Jamaat-e-Islami. Neither of them fought the last election, as we know, of course. And the Jamaat-e-Islami is now derecognized. But they are the Jamaat-e-Islami outside the time when it kind of got 12% votes, when it had a coalition arrangement with the PNP of Khalida Zia. Other than that, it has never got more than
4 to 5% vote.
4 to 5% votes. But it has got enormous nuisance value, enormous street power, particularly through its Islami Chhatra Shibir.
So, I mean, if we look at situation today in South Asia, this rise of right-wing in the countries, especially look like country in India, don't you think this also is providing a ground to the radicalization process that this sort of Islam wants to pursue? And if so, then what do you see? What is the way ahead?
If you read accounts of what's been happening in Bangladesh over time, you would find that the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, culminating in the kind of demolition of the Babri Mosque and the country-wide communal violence that followed, had a huge fallout in Bangladesh, where the Jamaat-e-Islami and the Islami Chhatra Shibir student wing and others let loose a reign of terror on the Hindus of Bangladesh, who had nothing to do with what had happened to Babri Masjid or whatever in this country. And there was even a judicial commission report has pointed out to the kind of atrocities that were committed, temples that were destroyed, houses that were looted, women who were abused, sexually abused, etc., etc. So, at the end of the day, the point remains that communalism is truly a subcontinental phenomenon. So in that sense, communalism needs to be fought firstly on a subcontinental level. Two, the kind of situation we find ourselves in today of growing intolerance, increasing radicalism, majoritarianism of the kind that is on the rise in India, particularly with in the last 2 years, with the RSS blessed government in power in Delhi, on the one hand. On the other hand, extremist terrorist groups functioning on Bangladesh soil and Pakistan soil make for an extremely volatile situation where the answer, what can be done is not immediately obvious, but I think we need to fight these forces within our own countries and also try and link up with secular democratic groups across the subcontinent, across India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, at the SARC level.
Thanks, Javed, for giving us your time, and thanks a lot. And as the issue proceeds, we'll be coming back to you on such things.